Hi, this is Mike Young with Noble Warriors. You're about to hear a seminar titled Debt Free Living: Lead Your Family Out of Financial Bondage, presented by Randy Rowekamp, the Virginia Area Director for Crown Financial Ministries from Midlothian, Virginia. This challenge was presented at the Iron Sharpens Iron Men's Conference in Fredericksburg, Virginia on March 19, 2011. My prayer is that this message will encourage you in your walk with Christ and better equip you to lead your family.
My name is Randy Rowekamp, and I'm here from Crown Financial Ministries. Just a little bit about myself. I retired from a corporate career that I was at for 30 years. That's been, it'll be 4 years in May. And before I retired, I started thinking about what am I going to do after I retire. And I just knew I wanted to do something for God and for the kingdom. So what I did is my wife and I talked about how maybe we could help people with their finances, because we had been able to manage our money, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. I was actually looking for a way to do this. I went to my pastor and I said, if there's people in the church who want some help with their finances, would it, if you want to send them to me and my wife, her name's Sarah, we'll try to help them. He said, fine. So I went home to my wife and I said, well, now we need, we have our experience, but we don't have any training, we don't have any materials. We need to find something that we could use. So that's when I was driving to work one day and I heard about Crown Financial Ministries. They were going to have a class, so we went to that class, and that's the beginning. And then when I retired, and I'll get into this a little bit later, I really feel like God called me into this ministry. I think He prepared me and my wife, and so I'm very passionate about what we do. I'm here to help you guys and help your churches. Because it is very liberating to be in a place where you can serve God, however He's called you to do. And for some men, that may be go into a ministry. For other men, it may be stay in their vocation, but be able to give. We talk about giving, say, 10% and going beyond that. What if you didn't need an income, but you loved your vocation and you wanted to stay in it, and you could give 80% of your money away? I mean, that's not an unheard thing. Some people do that. So that, the gamut is there for you, but we're going to start at the beginning and help you, work your way through some of those things. The title of my session is Debt Free Living. It's leading your family out of financial bondage. The reason I titled it that way was because Mike Young here at Noble Warriors is very much into men leading their families, being leaders. How many in here have been through men's fraternity or are going through it? Okay, some of you. And they have a definition of real manhood in there. And I like it. It's that he accepts responsibility, he rejects passivity, he leads courageously, and he expects the greater reward, which is God's reward. And so that's what I'm here. I don't know any of you personally, but I'm going to be prompting you to be the leader in your family with this area of finances. And there's different ways to do that, okay? So I'm not telling you to take over the checkbook or get your Excel spreadsheet out and be the one that maintains that. We'll talk about that later. But I want you to be the leader in your family in this area of finances, because it's very important. The statistics on divorce rates is that 56% of divorces are over finances. It's huge, and the same is true inside the church as it is outside the church. So this is a big issue. And so I'm here again to try to help you. This thing about financial bondage, normally when we think about bondage, we think of the Old Testament. We think, there's some real human slavery goes on in the world today. But this is about financial bondage. And if you don't think you're in financial bondage, if you have debt, just stop making your payments. And find out how long it is before they start trying to, jerk your chain and harass you to get you to pay. And to me, it's modern day bondage. And so we want to help you get out of that, because if we can free you up in that area, you're going to have a lot of peace. You're going to have a lot of peace. So, and in the Bible, it talks in Proverbs 22:7, it says, just as the rich rule over the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. Okay, so this is, Crown uses the Bible is the basis for everything we do. We have practical applications as well, but we know that the only thing that's going to change a person's heart is God and God's Word. So we use the Bible, because I could stand here and teach you all kind of financial things, how to get a budget, how to get out of debt. It's all just financial behavior. But if you don't have God's financial principles in your heart, it's going to be hard to keep doing it. And so we're going to talk about that. My objective today is to teach you how to get out of debt and then stay out of debt. And that's possible. I've talked to people that have told me they've been out of debt 3 times. He said, but this time I'm going to get out of debt and stay out. So you have a couple handouts. I'll go through those quickly. The little one, if you fill that out, you can put your information on there. We're going to give those to me. We're going to put them in a bag. We're going to do a drawing for the Debt-Free Living audiobook. So, and then there's going to be another one given away by Mike for all, that all participants will be kind of in that drawing. You have a form that has some free resources that you can get from Crown on the Crown website. So those are on there, as well as my contact information. I'm an area director for Crown. My area is pretty much Virginia Beach to Roanoke to North Carolina. Do not have all of Northern Virginia, but so I'm the representative in the area for Crown. And then the other handout you have, I didn't copy the whole presentation for you, but I picked out, I think, some key slides for you. So if you want to take notes on there, that's what that's for. Let's see. So I think, are there any questions so far? It is being recorded, so you can buy the recording, or if there's people from your church that came that wanted to hear about it, they can buy the recording. I don't handle any of that, but if you check with the people at Noble Warriors, that they can help you with that. So, and then if there are questions, and I encourage questions, I will repeat them because they want it on the recording. They won't hear the question otherwise. So we'll get started here. A little bit about Crown. It was founded by Larry Burkett and Howard Dayton. Larry Burkett had a ministry called Christian Financial Concepts. Howard Dayton had a ministry called Crown Ministries. And in 2000, Larry Burkett came to Howard and asked to merge their ministries. Larry had passed away in 2003. Chuck took over. Howard took over, but now a man named Chuck Bentley is our CEO for Crown. We're in 86 countries around the world, and we're the largest Christian financial ministry that's out there. And so what we're trying to do is get these principles out to everyone in the world. And so that's a pretty awesome task to do. What Crown is not, okay, I don't sell financial products or services, so I'm not here to help you manage your 401k or your retirement or anything like that. We don't do that. We partner with an organization called Kingdom Advisors that can help you. They have financial planners, or you can find a Christian financial planner, somebody if you want somebody like that. My role is really to serve the churches and the people. So that's what I do. If a church wants to introduce Crown into their church, then I can come alongside. I'll try to find out more about the church, how they do things, what their needs are, and tailor a program for them. I tell people this, there's no charges for my service, so it's a faith-based ministry, so there's no charges for that. The other thing I bring up right up front, I'm going to talk about a couple of the products we have. I don't make a commission on the sale of products, so I'm not here trying to sell you anything. I'm really here to help you in this area of stewardship and generosity, and to help you personally as well as your church. So, okay, we'll get into that later. So here's something that Chuck Bentley talks about. He says, if the entire world were out of debt, live on a budget, and have money in the bank, even by following God's financial principles, we would have failed in our mission. The world can do that without us. There was an article I live in Chesterfield County, and Chesterfield Observer had an article back in February. It's a great article, good advice about getting control of your debt. Okay, so that's good. People, and I read it, and it's a lot of good stuff in there. But that's not what we're about. We're about, again, transforming people's lives. And the interesting thing is, if once you start to get a handle on your finances, you're going to find that your intimacy with the Lord increases. And it's an amazing thing. And I tell people that, and sometimes they say, well, you're telling me if I go to a financial class or, I start learning about this, that's going to help me with my relationship with Jesus? I go, yeah. They say, well, how's that? And I just take the class, because it's different for every person that comes. So anyway, Then he says our mission is to carry the message of Christ so that people become more faithful stewards and become more generous. And, when you think about this area of stewardship, for Christians, what is the one thing Christians want to hear when they go to heaven? Well done. They want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. What we're here to do is try to help you become that good and faithful servant. Jesus is going to ask you God's going to ask you two things. He's going to say, what did you do with my son? And what did you do with what I gave you? That's what the Bible says. Those are the two questions he's going to ask. It's like having the test and exam, and before I take the test. So we know we're going to be asked that. So what we're here to do is help you become good stewards. So when you're asked that question, you'll be prepared. You will have been a good steward in this life. So, so let's go on, because I want to get into some of the topic here. But just about Crown, we have live seminars. There's like one-day seminars. We have Money Map coaching. That's where we have trained volunteers that can come alongside somebody and do one-on-one counseling and coaching to help them with their finances. We have DVD workshops that can be done like in Sunday school, Wednesday night, different. And see, this is what I have to figure out with the church. I have to figure out what they do to know which one of these things to recommend, because one size doesn't fit all. We have stuff for business and marketplace. Larry Burkett also wrote another book called Business by the Book. And so for people that have small business or in management, want to see what does God say about business. That's a good resource. We have things for children and youth. We know that these children need to learn how to save money, give money, and spend money. Those are three things we teach at a very young age, just those three things. Because it's important that they learn how to give at a young age, because if they don't give at a young age, they're not going to give when they grow up. They're going to have to learn it somehow. We have a course called Ignite for people that go on the missions field and want to teach these principles in the missions field. I did that. I went to Nigeria in 2007, spoke to a group of 45 pastors and one bishop, spent 2 days going through these materials, and it was awesome. It was very humbling, and they really learned a lot. So it was a very good experience. We have short films. One of the resources we have is on that handout I gave you. It's called God Provides. These are short films. They're Hollywood quality. There's 6 of them. Some of them go from 12 minutes. Some of them are 19. They're in between. They come with a companion guide. You don't need any training to do this. You can buy them, start a small group study in your church. Everything you need to know is right here in the companion guide. It'll take you. These films deal with heart issues, and so they're not about budgeting, not about how to get out of debt. But I'll give you an example. The first one that we recommend people use is the widow and oil. So it's that story of the widow and oil, and the theme of that one is, what do you have? That's what the prophet asked her. She said, my husband died, my debtors came, they want to take my children. What am I going to do? And he said to her, what do you have? She said, well, I don't have anything. What do you have? So finally she remembers she had a little bit of oil, and we know that story, right? Well, in this class, once the people see that film and you discuss it, there's really good discussion questions. Then the application for them is, what do you have that maybe you aren't even using anymore, and your neighbor could use it, or somebody in church that could use it? It just could be a physical thing. It could be maybe somebody needs help, with their car, and you understand cars, you know how to deal with that. You can help them, or some other field. So again, they're heart issues, and that's all part of being a good steward. Is our time, our talent, and our treasure. It's how we use all three of those things. It's not just, see, when I talk about stewardship in churches, a lot of times the first thing people think is giving. That's mostly what churches have taught about stewardship. But I'll tell you, He's not only interested in the 10%, He's interested in the 90%. There's no difference to God between a spending decision, an investing decision, or a giving decision, because it's all His money anyway. What you do with His money matters. And so we teach everything about stewardship, not just the giving part. And we do teach giving. We do believe in tithing. But, it's bigger than that. And in church, you generally don't hear much more than about the giving part. And then we have these financial studies. They're small group studies. We have a 10-week study. You go through a lot of biblical verses about different topics about making and managing money. There's practical applications that you do. how many verses in the Bible do you think deal with money and possessions? Just there you go. This man knows 2,350 verses in the Bible. It's more than what Jesus said about heaven and hell combined. And so the first question you got to ask yourself is why? Why did God put so much in there about money and possessions? And the reason is because he knew it was going to vie for the attention of his son. People get more trust in their money and their things than do in God. They worry more about their things, and their promotions and everything else than they do about what God thinks about them. So it's a huge issue, and so that's why it's so important. That's why I get very passionate about what I do, is to help people see that, because a lot of people, if you're not taught those things, you can't deal with them. So anyway, so now I'm going to kind of transition and talk a little bit about this book. I'm not going to go through the book with you, but that book is set up where there's some stories about people who got themselves in debt. Then there's another story about the same people, about what they did to get out of debt. And then in the back it has some reference material. So I'm just going to talk about 3 of the stories in here, just briefly, about what happens to people, why they end up in debt. So the first one is about Ben and Naomi. They fell into debt. And they fell into debt because of what they didn't know. And see what happens when people get married and come together, how their parents dealt with finances is what they bring into the marriage. And so it depends on what you've learned as you've grown up. And then you come into this marriage, and now you're trying to deal with this issue, and it doesn't get talked about a whole lot. It gets argued about a whole lot, but we need to talk about those things with our spouse. And again, that's what I want to challenge you. If you're in here and you're married, I want you to engage with your spouse in this area of finances and get it under control. So what happened to them is they had little or no understanding of finances. They found themselves overwhelmed by the opportunities to spend more than they made. How many people, think about it, do that because all we do all day long is get marketed to. Buy this, buy that, buy this, invest in that, do whatever. Well, I heard a statistic about a year ago. It says that for every day, on average, people get 50 messages to spend money and only 1 message to save money. So no wonder, people are living in what we call in Crown man's economy instead of God's economy. So they become part of that man's economy, and that's what they're taught, and so that's how they react, and that's what they do. You get into marriages, and one of them's an optimist, one's a worrier. Sometimes you got a saver, and or you got a hoarder, and somebody likes to spend money. You get all these different situations. So, and you never know, unless you've really, the person that you married real well and how they're going to think about finances before you get married. Then you're going to find out afterwards, and then you need to work on it. And that's what marriage is about, is working through things. So, they weren't stupid. These were not stupid people. They just were ignorant. And eventually in this story, they ended up in bankruptcy. But the verse here for us is, a prudent man sees danger and takes refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it. And so again, we want to help you to get this knowledge. Then there was Bud and Sandy. Now they're on this side where they had a lot of money. They were very indulgent people. They had good salaries. They got into impulse buying. They get-rich schemes and things like that. And all those things have one source, and it's called greed. And if you really want to understand what God thinks about greed, do a word study on it. There's people here from Logos. They have I have that software package. You can do it if you can have other ones, or you can do it by yourself. Find out what God says about greed, because it's not very nice. We think about some of the obvious things, murdering people or doing things like that. God does not like greed at all, and so we don't want to be greedy. And then there was this idea that making more money would make them happy. And if you look in 1 Timothy 6 through 10, it says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we were brought into the world, and we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with what we have." And the Bible teaches about contentment, and when it does, it's generally around money and possessions. If you go do a study on contentment, you'll find that it's mostly about money and possessions and what he's given us. People who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So again, we want to learn to be content. Contentment is learned. We're not born to be content. We're kind of born selfish, and so we want more. And so we need to learn to be content. And here the verse is, steady plotting brings prosperity, hasty speculation brings poverty. And then the last couple was Jackson and Lynn. And this is a story of people that a lot of unexpected things happened to them. They got married. They both had jobs. They lost their jobs. They found out she was pregnant. That was not planned. Then the child was born with spina bifida, so they had a lot of medical, and they were unemployed, so they started to develop a lot of medical expenses. So this happens to people. We understand that, and I mean every reason, all the reasons why people are in debt aren't because they can't manage money. There's sometimes things happen to families that big expenses, and so we have to learn to deal with that. And this is an area where God taught me a lot, and this was before Crown. We have 5 children, and our second oldest child, when he was about 11 or 12, it was very difficult to deal with. My wife was trying to homeschool. He was very difficult, and we tried to manage through that, and we weren't doing very well. So we thought, well, we better have him tested. So we took him to psychologists to have him tested, and they did these tests, and what they came back and they said, they labeled him as oppositional defiant. And that happens to some people. And think about that. I mean, here's this child. Not only is he defiant, I mean, not only is he rebellious, but he's oppositionally defiant about doing it. I mean, so it's very, very difficult to deal with. So it was really a disruption in the household with the other children. So my wife and I, we found a Christian residential treatment program. And this was not drug related. This was not alcohol related. This was just his nature at that time. So we put him in this program. He was there about 13 or 14 months, but then, this has been like in the early 90s, it was $100 a day to have him in this program. It was like $3,000 a month. And we never had to borrow money to get through this. God was faithful. What we did is my wife had been staying at home. She loves yard sales. She went out, started buying things at yard sales that she knew were worth a lot more than what she paid for them at the yard sale, and she'd advertise them and sell them. We had a bedroom in our basement that we rented out to some people for a couple of years. We started having a little income from that. But that's where I really learned how faithful God was. And all through that time, we continued to tithe, we continued to make offerings. We just were dependent on God. And so I just want you to know that He is very faithful. And if you do your part, He'll do His part. So I know what the unexpected looks like. So I speak that to you. Again, here's that verse about being content. In Philippians, we've all seen this. We learn about this being contentment, and we have that verse about I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. A lot of times that verse gets used a lot for a lot of other things, and that's okay. God's word's that way. It can be done. But if you look at it in its context, it's a money and possessions verse. That I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Whether you have a lot, don't have a lot, just to be content with what He's given you. So contentment is very, very important. I'm going to show you a testimony here of a family who got out of debt. And oops. So watch those speakers there. They're not up real loud, but they may. Can you guys hear it back there?
Had no savings. I mean, we were broke. Heading down a not very good path, financially speaking. But praise God, He had a good plan for us. This is the story of Michelle.
Michelle and Trevor Thomas, an average American couple who obeyed God's calling on their lives to get and remain out of debt. Here is their story.
When we were premarital counseling, I don't think I knew the extent of his debt at that point. I don't think it was until we actually got married that we laid it off, because he was just, he would kind of brush it off.
We married in late January of 1998, and we embarked on our honeymoon. While we were there, Michelle took financial stock of things, and it was pretty bleak, and it really made her uncomfortable. And she was so uncomfortable. In fact, she was ready for us to end our honeymoon 2 days early and come home because we were so broke. And so we did. We came home early from our honeymoon, and she was ready right then, to nail down a budget.
So I got us on a really strict budget. All of my income was going toward paying off debt after tithing on it, and his income was, paying the bills.
Michelle ended up paying off her own engagement ring because of the strategy that we were using. Using her income to pay off the debt, living off of mine.
Paying off my own engagement ring was an experience. There was probably a little bit of resentment there. I had hoped that he had been more financially responsible before we got married. And it was just a little hard to deal with at first.
To get out of debt, that meant not taking on any more debt.
We couldn't eat out much. We couldn't buy a lot of clothes. We couldn't take long vacations. Had to stay around town. We just tried to be as frugal as we could be. We started with the smallest debt first and paid that one off, and then used what we were paying on that debt to pay on the next one, the next smallest one, and then on until we had paid everything off. It took about 13 months, I believe, to pay everything off.
My eyes were really opened when I did a Bible study. That's what got to my heart. I mean, it was in my head, and I was okay with things, but what really sold me was to see the things that we were doing and backed up by biblical principles, by Scripture. There was another step to our whole future that was huge. That was the biggest step for us, and it was a calling to live our lives completely debt-free, to never borrow again for anything, for a home, for cars, for anything. This was not my plan at all. I was behind, getting out of debt. I was behind living on a budget, but to never borrow money again was a huge step for me. It was not in my plans to do things this way for us. I had always envisioned, borrowing for a home, even for future cars. I could not see any way around that. And so, it was a Sunday morning at church. I just felt the call of the Lord on my heart, and I looked at Michelle. I remember looking at Michelle and like, are you ready to make a commitment to the Lord to live completely debt-free the rest of our lives, to never borrow money again?
After heeding the call to remain debt-free and to allow God to provide through his unique ways, the Thomases built their own home over the course of several years, completely debt-free.
There's a peace in our home. There's a peace in our marriage. Our children know it because the Lord drew us to this path, pointed us to this path. We have been blessed, just applying what He said in His Word, what He's shown us through prayer and the wisdom of others.
One of the things that we enjoyed about being debt-free is that on an average income, Trevor's a teacher, and I can bring in a little bit of money working part-time. We're able to support 9 ministries on a monthly basis, and then other people and organizations as means arise.
What we've done was a specific calling for us. I believe that Scripture teaches that debt should be, borrowing should be a rare occurrence, but it's not wrong or sinful, to borrow money. I'm certainly not saying that, but this calling for us to do things this way was to be an encouragement, to give others hope.
Thank you. back. Okay. So I hope that encourages you. Again, that's what flames my fire, or fuels my fire, and very passionate about this. And again, that's what I wish for all of you, that you would have a story like that if that's what you want to do. So let's talk some more about getting out of debt then, and some of the reasons. And we all know about icebergs. I've got a picture of an iceberg up here. And we all know the real problem with icebergs is what's below the surface, right? So what a lot of people see is financial problems, and we understand that and acknowledge those. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. What's really at stake here are spiritual issues. And if I had to say that at sort of a high level, the three spiritual issues that we're talking about here is first is understanding that God owns everything and God's in control. That's where you got to start. We've heard that, but you have to really get that into you and study that. The next one is that we have to learn to be content with what God's given us. And then the last one is have our focus on eternity, not on this earth. And I heard a really good analogy about a month ago. So if we think of that's the beginning of time, or that's the beginning of eternity over there, and that's the end of eternity over there, I know that's an oxymoron. There's no beginning and end, but that's where eternity is. And we're right here. We're this little dot, and we're going through life like this. And so if we're putting our trust in our money and possessions, okay, we came into this world without anything. We're going to leave this world without anything. But if we're focused on this, what are we doing? We're walking away from our treasure, right? We're leaving it behind because we're going to leave it behind. But if we're putting our treasure over there in heaven and we're walking that way, what are we doing? We're getting closer and closer to our treasure. And so that's a key. And that's a key part of stewardship is putting that treasure up in heaven. How is that done? That's by being generous. It's by helping people, by loving our neighbor, living a Christ-like life. That's what that treasure in heaven's all about. And so, again, we want to help you in the area of the money and possessions part. There's other areas to that. But what I'd like to show you is we're going to talk about the money map. Crown has this thing called a money map. There's 7 destinations to what we call true financial freedom. I'm only going to go through the first 3 because the first 3 will get you out of debt. And if you do those 3 things, it'll keep you out of credit card debt and consumer debt. I'm going to talk a little bit about mortgages. The first 3 steps won't get you out of your mortgage debt, but it'll get you out of all the other debt. So on here are these 7 destinations. On your handout, I think it is, of the slides, there's a on Crown's website, there's a crownmoneymap.org. You can go there. You can interact with this money map. You can see it. You can put information in it. It has a lot of other resources there that it'll guide you to. So that we use this to try to show people there is kind of some steps that you can take. This isn't random. There's a way to do this, and it works. And it leads to what we call true financial freedom. I'll tell you what that means in a minute. But on the back is this thing called My Life Purpose and My Life Goals. And so this is the part, again, where I want to challenge you as men and with your spouse to sit down and talk about what is our life purpose? What are we doing? What are we doing with our money? What are we trying to accomplish with our money? Because that is the beginning of leading your family, because you and your wife then, if you're married, can get on the same page. And now when we need to make a decision about money, we have a common goal. And so we're either going to spend money that's going to align us with our goal or not. And if we're not, then we have to say, do we want to change our goal, or do we not want to spend this money on this thing? You see, you get me? So it starts that conversation. It's a good way to get into this whole discussion about finances with your spouse. So anyway, that's the money map. And like I said, get down here. We're going to go through the first 3 steps. But let me tell you, here's what we call financial freedom in Crown. So we're not talking about Warren Buffett. We're not talking about prosperity gospel. We're not talking about poverty gospel. We're talking about stewardship. True financial freedom is not being rich. It is the freedom from the bondage of debts, oppression of others, envy, greed, or resentfulness, and freedom to respond without hesitation to the prompting of the Holy Spirit In short, to fulfill the purpose for which God has you here on earth. That's what financial freedom is being in that position where you're free to do what God asked you to do and put us here for. So we'll go into destination 1 here. And there's 2 steps on here. One is to get on a spending plan. That's what we call it. A lot of people call it a budget. But it's very important that you get that. This is one of the first. There's 2 things here. This is very important that you get on a budget. And budgets can be very freeing. A lot of people say, I don't want to be on a budget. It's too much work. It confines me. I can't do what I want to do. I'm going to have this budget thing, and it's going to keep me from having fun, whatever. We're going to talk about that, and I'm going to show you how to create this. And when we finish these first 3 steps, then I'm going to show you how the steps to take to do this. There's 3 reasons why you want to have a spending plan. The first one is you start making fact-based decisions rather than using your emotions. So now when I'm getting ready to spend money, I look to see if I have planned for it in my budget. And if I have, and I have the money in the savings account or wherever it is, the checking account, I can spend it on that thing that I budgeted for. So I'm not saying, I'd really like to have the latest toy, a new rifle or a new fishing pole or a new running shoes or whatever. If they're in your budget, fine. That's what I'm saying. It's freeing. If they're in your budget, you budgeted for those shoes or whatever that thing is, that's fine. We're not against that. We just don't want you to do it based on an emotional decision. We want it to be fact-based. Another reason you want to have it in your budget, there's those days when you might be, going through Walmart or Best Buy or someplace, and you see that DVD player or the Blu-ray, or you see the flat screen TV that you want, and like, man, that would be great to have during March Madness. I'd like a bigger flat screen TV in my den. I'm gonna watch this game, and I'll be able to see their faces and see their eyes. Well, and say it's on sale. So, that's even better reason I'm gonna buy it. Well, what's in your budget? And what's in your, we don't want you looking in your checkbook. So you're in there and I got enough money to pay for that flat screen TV in my checkbook right now. I don't even have to go into debt. I got it. Well, we want you to realize that what's in that checkbook may be needed for other things that are in your budget, other bills that are still going to come in this month, right? So we want you to look to your budget for your spending decision, not to the checkbook. Use it, again, a fact-based decision. And then the other thing that you want to budget for is, stuff does happen in the month. And if for some reason you spend more than you plan for in a particular month in a budget area, then you've got to take it from somewhere else. But where is it? If you have a budget, you'll know, like, say something comes up and you're for one of your children or whatever, and you got to spend some money you hadn't planned on. But you see some money in entertainment, so you go to your wife and you say, we're just not going to be able to go out to dinner as many times this month as we normally do, because we're going to need that money to come over here. So that's what a budget lets you do, because, and we teach budgeted balances, balanced budgets, so that you never spend more than you make. That was one thing my wife and I always did. We never spent, we were married 6 years without children, and we just saved her money. We lived on my income because we knew someday we'd have a family. And we didn't want to get our style of living up, and standard of living up, where we needed her income too. And so we just saved that money, and we were able to use that money for down payments, to buy furniture, without getting into debt, so, but you just don't want to spend more than you make. That's a very important key. So, so then if you're going to develop a budget, well, we recommend keep it simple. If you're very technically savvy and you want to use some computer program, there's mint.com, Crown has envelopes that you can use, but if or you can use Excel, but if you don't like that and you just want to do it on paper, you can create a form, you can do it on paper. Whatever's going to work for you, and it's going to be easy, because you don't want to keep yourself from budgeting because it's too hard, because you made it too hard for yourself. You also want to think about things yearly. Some things you pay once a year, maybe twice a year, maybe 4 times a year. So you've got to put, so if you're paying, car insurance is an example of that. If you put what you're going to owe and you divide it by 12, if you think about it annually, divide it by 12. Each month you want to be saving 1/12 of that, so when the bill comes in, you've got it. You don't want to wait for that month to hit when all of a sudden that payment's there and now the money's not in the budget anymore. It's got to come from somewhere. So you want to think ahead and put that money in the budget. It'll be in your savings account. It'll be in your checking account. And that's why we don't want you looking at your checkbook to make a financial decision, because that money's there for another reason. And then the other thing is, with budgets, what you'll find is that there may be some areas in your budget that you're, and Crown has, and I'm going to show you this, some guidelines for your budget. Like for automobile and home, like what are the percentages you should be thinking about in your budget? What we find is when people are over those percentages, significantly, what we're dealing with is a heart issue. The reason people overspend in areas is, I just want to have the best car. I just want to have the best boat. I just want to go on the nicest vacations. I just want to have the clothes that just make me feel good about myself. Whatever it is. And I'm not saying, and I'm not opposed to any of that stuff. What I'm saying is, though, when people get overboard in those areas, it's a heart issue. And so you got to realize that. And when the first time you do your budget, you may find some areas where there's some heart issues. And what does the Bible say? It says where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. And again, that's why money is taking our attention off of Jesus, because we get our heart into some area of money and possessions, and it's not on Him. So, and I'm not picking on anybody in here. I don't know any of you guys, so I'm not picking on anybody. So don't take this personally, please. The other thing that'll happen when you start budgeting, you'll find some areas where you didn't realize you were spending that much money, and it won't be a hard issue. It'll be, man, if I had known that, I would have cut that out or cut it down. What happened? My wife and I do money map coaching, and inevitably that happens. People say, "Man, you know how much I spend on Starbucks every week?" And they'll go, "No," and they'll tell me, and they say, "I'm only going one day a week now instead of every day on the way to work. I'm making the coffee at home and I'm taking it with me." Whatever. So those aren't hard issues. Those are just, a budget is like a knowing where you are with your money. It tells you exactly where you are with your money. That's why it's so important. And it's number one in these 7 destinations. If you don't have a budget, you're not going to be able to figure out how to get out of debt. You may, but this will make it a whole lot easier. The other thing, the $1,000 for emergencies, if you have $1,000 in the bank, say, this month you got to get the car inspected, and they tell you need 4 new tires. Okay, instead of getting a credit card out, you use the emergency savings. Now you can budget for the tires. You can do it that way too. But if emergencies come up, if you have $1,000 excess, you will be able to cover about 90 to 95% of those emergencies. Not a new heat pump that's $5,000 or $6,000, but you'll cover most of them without having to go into debt or use your credit cards again. So that's why that's important. So, and the verse here is, the wise man saves for the future, but the foolish spends whatever he gets. And we also tell people, when you finish this, these little check box, when you finish those, check them off, and when you finish destination 1, celebrate. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and blow your budget, but I am saying, if you have children, send them off, spend the night with your wife, do something that's affordable and reasonable that you both enjoy doing, but celebrate the fact that you've done this now. That's important. The second one, then, is to pay off our credit cards. Okay, and so, and then increase our savings to 1 month. So we started with 1,000. Now we want to build it up. We're going to continue to build up our savings. Okay, that we don't just stop at 1,000. We're going to continue to build them up. So how do we get out of credit card debt? So I've got my budget, and I know how much money I I know what my credit card payments are each month, right? You know what your minimum payments are anyway, but you don't want to just pay minimum payments, okay? But you know what that debt is, and now you can take your money and start applying it to the debts. What we talk about, and I'm going to cover it in detail, is a debt snowball. And like they said on that video, you start with the smallest amount, and you rank it by amounts to begin with, not interest rates. Okay, you want to knock off that lowest one first, the lowest amount, and then the next one. And now if you get to a place where you got 2 that are about the same amount of money, and one's at a very high interest rate and the other one's not, yeah, sure, do the highest interest rate one first. And don't go after the biggest one you got first either, because you won't be celebrating for a while. You want to start at the bottom. And then when you pay the first one off, you take that amount plus what you're paying on the second one, the second lowest one, you add it to that amount, and you speed that one up, speed to paying that off. You get that second one done, you take the first and second amount, you apply it to the third one. And you just keep doing that, and that's what they did in the video. It took them 13 months, but they went through that list, and they got rid of it. And so that's what we teach. How many here think you really could pay off your credit cards and not have to use them, not be in debt? No, that's good.
I have used mine for 2 years.
Great. Yeah, now, and here's the other thing. In Crown, we don't say credit cards are bad. And my wife and I have them. We pay them off at the end of the month, though. We like getting points. You know, you can get frequent flyer miles, you can get rewards. So but you only use, and I'll cover this in the next slide, so I won't go there right now. But we want you to increase your savings to 1 month's living expenses in the event, say you get hurt on the job. It takes about a month to get workman's comp coming. So you want to be able for a month not have to use your credit card, not go into debt, you know, just pay cash for things just like you were working. So that's destination 1 or 2. And now here's the rules for credit card usage. Again, only use them for budgeted items. Okay, we're not making emotional decisions to buy things, you know. We're only using them for things we know are in our budget. And you pay them off at the end of the month. And the last thing on here is if you can't pay it off, cut it up and close out the account. You'll still have to pay for it, right? You're still going to get the bill. You've got to pay for it. But you need some self-discipline. If you keep using it, get rid of it. And now, and when I bring this up, some people say, well, that's going to hurt my, you know, if I close that account, it's going to hurt my FICO score. Well, okay, I don't have time. That's not my purpose today. That's not true. There's ways to manage that without hurting your FICO score, to just get rid of some credit cards and close those accounts out. That's possible. Sure. Yeah.
Just say like if the FICO score is low, all right, and your account's already closed, how do you build it back up by still paying off the debt, the credit card debt?
Yeah, the FICO's one of the bases for FICO scores is payments on time, payments on time. So you want to keep making those payments, and that'll help boost it up. Oh, so for the recording, the question was, if you have a credit card and it's closed, should I still make payments on it, and will it help my FICO score? So, okay, so I did the answer first, then the question. Read minds now. Okay, destination 3 then is we're paying off our consumer debt. So our credit cards are paid off now. Okay, we got a month's worth of savings in the bank. And now we're going to start paying off our car. That's the big thing. There could be furniture, could be school loans, there's things like that. So now we don't have this credit card debt, right? So we can start putting a lot of money on our car payments and things like that. And what we want to do with our car is we want to pay it off. And then we want to keep driving it. You don't want to be like my friend at work that it used to be every 3 years, you'd have a loan for 3 years. Every 3 years, he'd turn the car in, get a new one, because he said, I'm always going to have a car payment, so I might as well have a nice car. So every 3 years, he'd buy a new car, pay it off in 3 years, and then he'd buy another one. So we don't want to do that. We want you to, with the car you have right now, pay it off, and then the first month after you pay it off, we want you to take that money and save it. Pay yourself. Act like you're the dealer or the lending institution you were paying to. Put it in the bank. Put it in the bank next month, and month after that. Just keep saving. Drive your car until, and you know, talking to a group of guys, you know what I'm talking about. There's a point where, you know, it's just not worth putting more money into that car. It's just, you know. So when you get to there, that's the time you sell it. Now, my wife and I, we're going to be married 40 years in September. In 40 years, we've bought 3 brand new cars. We've always bought used cars. And again, we didn't learn this in Crown. We just did it. Okay, so because here's what happened. You know, you all know this. You buy that car, and you drive it off the lot, and the depreciation starts immediately, and it goes like this, right? It's depreciating for the life of the car. The value of the car is down here, and at some point, that value of that car and the depreciation line cross. That's where you want to buy a car, because now the depreciation is going to be very little, but the value of the car is going up, right? It's still a good car. and it's not costing you much. The value's going up. So where does that happen? 2.5 to 3.5 years old cars. So you take your car, you sell it. We always sell our cars, okay? And if there's something wrong with it, I tell the person. I'll tell them, hey, it's got this or that. My son had a 97 Honda Civic. The crankshaft broke, but he found a mechanic that could buy an engine cheap, put the engine in the car, either keep the car or sell it. You will find he sold it for $500. Okay, you will find somebody that'll buy a car like that. So you sell your car outright, and you buy a used car. You pray about it, and you look for a good used car, and that's what you buy. You've now saved some money, right? You got a little bit of money from the selling your car, and you pay cash for the next car. And then what do? You keep making the payment to yourself. You don't stop then. You're always making a car payment, but now you're making it to yourself. Okay? So that's how you don't have car payments. So how many of you think you could not have car payments the rest of your life?
Not a problem.
All right.
I've got a POS for a long time.
All right.
It's a very good little car. It was a 91, little four-cylinder, runs like a dream.
Yeah.
I do all my own maintenance.
Right. Great. Okay, and the other thing here is it says increase your savings to 3 months living expense, and it has a little asterisk there. What does that mean? Here's our recommendation, and this comes not only from Crown but other places. You have to take whatever your annual salary is, divide it by 10,000. That's the number of months that it will take you to find a job that pays a comparable amount doing what you've been trained to do.
Say that again, would you please?
So you take your annual salary, divide it by $10,000, and you get a number. Whatever that number is on average how many months it's going to take you to find a job like the one that you had. Now that was prior to like 2007. I mean, last couple years, that number's got to be bigger. All right, it's taking people longer to find comparable jobs. Okay, so but that's our recommendation. So that's what I'm saying. You got to develop a mindset of savings. You got to start saving money and build that thing up from 1,000 to 1 month to however many months that is, based on this little item here. And then don't stop. Keep going. That's what's going to lead you to true financial freedom. You gotta have savings. You gotta, so that you don't at some point in your life don't have to have a job for your source of income. Your source of income will be from your savings and investments. That's where you want to get. Okay, reducing credit card debt. I'm going to hurry up here a little bit. We talked about automobile debt, home mortgage. Once you've finished destination 3, now what you want to do with all that money you were spending on cars and cars you're saving, but the credit cards and that, dump it on your mortgage. You're making payments against your principal. The rule of thumb is if you have a 30-year loan, you're going to pay 3 times what you borrow to pay it off. Now, it's interest rate sensitive to some degree, but, if it was 20% interest, it'd be very high. But, it's sensitive to that, so it's plus or minus 3 times. If you have a 15-year mortgage, you're going to pay twice what you borrowed. So what you want to do is you want to pay that thing off. And then some people say, well, what about my income tax write-off? I can write off that interest. Well, that thought comes from banks. Banks love, wouldn't you like to get 3 times what you lent somebody back? I would, that'd be nice. So that's what banks like. So that's why that's where that idea of don't have an income tax write-off comes from. I'd rather pay the government a little bit more and have that peace, just like those couple in that film, that I don't have to worry about that house payment anymore. It's gone. That's where you want to be. Investment debt, never borrow for investments unless the investment, the sole collateral is the debt. Business debt, I know businesses have to borrow, but if you can get your debt reduced or eliminate it, you're going to have a competitive edge. Your products and your services are going to cost less, and you're going to have more business because you'll be able to outbid your competition. Co-signing, never ever co-sign. It's poor judgment to co-sign, right? Yeah, never ever ever co-sign. Well, right. Now, and here's, okay, not it is bad judgment, and there's other things the Bible says about co-signing, but here's what I've learned about co-signing and why God doesn't like it. Let's suppose Curtis, say Curtis and I are the best of friends, and Curtis comes to me and says, "Hey, Randy, can I borrow, $1,000? I need, or will you co-sign for me for a car?" I'm just going to use a bad example, but a car. And I say, "Sure," And then a couple months later, Curtis can't pay for it. What's going to happen to our friendship?
It's done.
It's done.
I might as well come to you and say, Randy, I don't like you anymore.
Right. And see, that's what God is interested in. God loves people. He wants us to love people. He doesn't want that to come between us. So my response to that should be, Curtis, I'll just give you the money. If you pay me back, great, but I'm not co-signing. I'll give you, if you need that thing, I'll give it to you.
Randy, I want a car.
We're not that good of friends yet, buddy. Just kidding.
Would that co-signing be the same thing if, let's say, a father-son went into buying a house together for investment property? Is that still the same bad idea, co-signing, where we're buying a property to flip it after it's being built?
I think if you're in it together like that, the bank may require you to do that, and that's more of a business arrangement, So, but if one of you, if the father's doing it to help fund the son, and really isn't an active partner in it, then I would say you want to think about that, because the same thing could happen. And the other thing, like co-signing for your children, the reason that we don't recommend that is you're teaching them to get in debt. You just said, go ahead and get in debt. I'll sign for you. That's not what we're talking about here. We want everybody out of debt, so we don't want to teach them to get into debt. Okay, I got to keep moving here. Good questions. Okay, what about consolidation loans and this thing about home equity loans? They're kind of the same thing. Don't do them unless you're very disciplined. If you don't have a budget and you're very disciplined with your spending, don't do them, because what's going to happen, sure, you're going to consolidate, get one payment, maybe it's lower interest rate, but if you're not disciplined and on a budget, you're going to start borrowing other money. You're going to start using another credit card. And now you have this consolidated loan you're trying to pay off, and you're accumulating more debt, so don't do it. But if you've got that discipline, it's a strategy that can work, but you've just got to have the right context for it. And then, should I borrow on my 401k? We generally say that's not a good idea. Again, that's your future, your future income. So unless it's an emergency, we don't recommend that. Okay, so let's go through the steps of how to get out of debt. So the first thing is, and this is on your handout there, pray for God's help and God's strength to do this, okay? Because again, most people are not on budgets, so this is something you're going to have. It's a change in your behavior, so start praying about it and get for God to help you through this. Start tithing regularly. You say, well, Randy, I need all this money to get a budget going. I'm telling you, from my own experience, God is faithful, and He expects the tithe. I mean, in Malachi, we know, you've probably heard those verses, that if you don't pay your tithe, it's like stealing from God. I'm not going to read the verse, I have it here, but God is very serious about this. And so we encourage you. Now, if you're not tithing right now, and tithe means 10%. I've heard some people say, I'm tithing, that just means they're giving, If you're not tithing, get your heart right with the Lord and start somewhere, even if it's 1%. And your intent is to go to 2, and then 3, and build it up. So I don't want to condemn anybody. I don't want, but if you're not tithing, start working on it and build that up to the 10%. Accumulate no new debt. We talked about that. So get rid of those credit cards and quit borrowing money. Okay. Then you're going to keep a 30-day diary. Why are you going to do that? That's where you're going to learn where your money's going each month. If I ask each one of you right now to come up with your budget, and I gave you a sheet that has categories for like car, food, clothing, all those things, you could probably estimate. There's some things that you know for sure. You know what your house payment is, or rent. So you're going to be able to put some numbers in there with, but there's some numbers you're going to guess at. But if you keep track of your spending for 30 days, you're going to start to find out exactly where it's going. And what you do is you just carry a little spiral notebook around with you. There's a form. These forms are on Crown's website. You can go to crown.org. At the top it has tools. You can pull that down and you'll see downloadable things. They're PDFs. They're free. You can download them. So you take every day, whenever you spend money, you put it in your little spiral notebook, and every couple of days you put it on the 30-day diary. At the end of the month, you add it up, and you put that number on the budget form. So you'll start to see what your budget is and what you're spending money on. Okay, so you establish the written monthly budget, which allows for monthly surplus for the debt repayment. So again, you're paying at least the minimums, but you want to have extra money that you can start adding to those payments so that you can get through step 2. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's not. Would you recommend maybe using amount ranges? Like, let's say if it's a $45 payment you're making, maybe you round it up to 50, even though it's extra, but you end up with like fixed numbers that you can deal with easier versus.
Yeah. The question is if you can use just kind of a rounding up or down, use some ranges on. Actually, the spending guidelines that you'll find on Crown's website are ranges, because it's not a thou shalt be this percent. It's based on what people who have balanced budgets typically spend in these areas. So they'll have it for different incomes and different family sizes. But yeah, you know, if it makes it easier, that's why I said make it easy. You know, if it's easier for you to do that, do it that way. You want to set up your savings account and begin funding it to that $1,000 we talked about. And so you want to start in your budget, you want to have some money that's going to go into savings, and that savings is going to become that $1,000. This is the 30-day diary form. Again, you can get that from crown.org. This is the monthly income and expenses. This is what a budget looks like. You know, and for housing, it has a lot of, you know, it's the mortgage, insurance, taxes, electricity, gas, water, sanitation, phone. Cell phones we tend to put somewhere else, but maintenance on that house. You know, they're all, and you'll see you have your gross income, right, what you get paid. Then you take out the tithe and the taxes. We take those out first. What's left is called net spendable income. So these percentages that we have for housing and things are based off of net spendable income, not gross income.
Question is regarding gross. So if you're looking at your pay stub, say it's $4,000 gross, and then you get your normal FICA, Social Security, and all that. You have benefits, you know, medical coverage for your family, and then, because I've always grappled with this, it's like, okay, now that after that 4,000, after you take everything out, you got child support every month, that is 2,000 that's left. With tithing, it should be right off of that 4, right? So it's kind of.
That's God's word says the first fruits. You know, and even in Old Testament times, people paid taxes. Remember, Jesus talked about the tax collectors, and you look back in so some people say to me, well, they didn't have to pay taxes then. I said, oh, yeah, they did. But God expects it on the gross. And I jokingly talk to people and say, you know, do you want to be blessed on your gross or blessed on your net? You know? So, yeah, that's the goal, okay, is to work towards gross, tithing on the gross income. This is the rest of that form. I don't want to go through these right now. That wasn't my intention. Okay, so let's go back to getting out of debt. Oh, and one thing I have, if you want a lot of information, Crown has, this is called Creating a Spending Plan, how you do this. It's $28 for the video and the book. You can, if you want to do it in your church, they're like $10 a book, $20 or $18 for the video. You know, you can do this in church, do it at home. And now we're going to talk about eliminating debt. They have this. It's another 2-hour video with the book. It's a seminar instructor led, so you know you get a lot of detail, a lot more than I'm going through right now. So those are resources. They're listed on that one form that I gave you. I'm behind on my paper over here. Okay, so now what you do is you list your assets, everything you own. So that's what you own. And then you're going to list your liabilities. That's everything you owe. Okay, so you're going to, and there's a form for this right there. And again, you can download that. So you're going to list all those things so you know where you're at. And then you're going to establish a debt repayment schedule. Okay? And this is how you get into that debt snowball I was talking about. So there's the debt list. So you'll have on there who you owe it to, the contact information, what the payoff is, how many payments are left, what you're paying every month, the due date, and the interest rate. Once you have that, based on the payoff column, you're going to put the smallest one right here. And you're going to pay that one off. And then you're going to pay this one off. And you're going to pay this one off. And you're just going to move down that list until you pay them all off. Okay? Another thing is to consider earning additional income. Now, the thing I bring out about this is, do you think it's easier to reduce your debt by saving money or earning more income? What's going to be more effective in terms of paying off your debt? You know, saving some more money that you can apply to that debt, or making additional income to pay off the debt? Saving. Because for every dollar, you can put $1 on the debt. When you go out and earn additional income, you're going to pay taxes, you pay Social Security, you know, might put you in a higher tax bracket, and not to mention, you know, it's going to be time away from home, you know, more time away from home. So if you can save more in some of these areas of your budget and apply that to the debt, that's more effective. But you may have to do both. Or the other option is you may have things you could sell. There may be some things you can sell and take what you get from that and pay a couple bills off. Same thing like with income tax return. You know, when you get that income tax return, one thing you can think about doing with it is paying off, you know, some of those debts. So then, learn to be content with what you have. Now, I'm not talking about complacency. Okay, I'm talking about being content, working hard, looking to the Lord to promote and provide. But, you know, be content. Don't try to artificially increase your lifestyle and get yourself in debt. And you may have to consider a radical change in your lifestyle. You know, you heard on that video, that's what they had to do. She couldn't buy the clothes she wanted to buy. You know, there were some things that you may have to do for a period of time. You know, it won't be forever, but there may be a period of time when you have to do that. And please don't give up. You know, keep at it. So let me go through these forms. Okay, I have another testimony here. If we have time, I'll come back to that. I want to make sure I finish a couple things here. It's about a couple who got Money Map coaching, just so you can see, because there's on that little piece of paper you have, there's a box there where you can check if you want. We have volunteers that are trained Money Map coaches. If you want help from someone, check that box off. We'll get back to you. We'll see if we can find a coach that can sit down with you and help you, you know, set up a budget, give you some ideas on how to deal with it, how to save money, how to maybe reduce spending and things like that. So that's what's on there, and this was an example for you. So here's the friendly advice for the married folks. Get to it here. You know, work together. Like I said, if there's nothing else you take from this, you know, just work with your spouse on this area of finances. It's very, very important. If you're married, seek counsel from your wife. You know, that'll preserve your relationship. And even if she isn't that good with money or doesn't like doing the detail, now my wife does. I mean, she likes the detail. She keeps track of our stuff. But if your wife doesn't like doing that, or she doesn't really understand some things about money, God gave her intuition. God gave her some insights that women have different insights than men. So a lot of times, I have a friend that used to own some Napa stores. And at one point, he was getting ready to do something in his business. And his wife, you know, he talked to his wife about it, and she said, I just don't really think we ought to do that right now. I think it was a little bit of expansion or something he wanted to do. And so he didn't do it, and it turned out later, it was very good that he didn't, because I don't remember the details. But, I mean, if he had done it, it would have hurt him in his business. So that's why I'm saying women, you know, even though she didn't really totally understand that business, she had that intuition. So it honors your wife. And then if things do turn out bad, they don't turn out the way you wanted them, it was a decision you made together. So now you're in it together. Now you'll work to get out of it together, as opposed to these situations where if I do something and my wife's not on board and then it goes bad, now it's double or triple or 4 times as bad as if we had done it together, right? So if you're not married, we recommend as singles, get advice from your parents. Even if they're not walking with the Lord, they've got age and experience that you don't have. So get counsel from them. Seek counsel of the Lord, seek the counsel of godly advisors. Get advice. If you're not really totally understanding finances or how to do this, get advice. People in your church, or you can find somebody who'll help you. That was the final thoughts. Then is fill out that form so you get a chance to win the book. If you'd like a Money Mac coach, fill that out on there. If you'd like me to come in and talk with you or your church leadership or pastor about Crown and doing some things in Crown and their church around stewardship and generosity, fill that out. I'll get back to you. If I'm going to put your name in the list for my newsletter, so you'll get it once. If you don't want it after that, you can unsubscribe to it. But if you give me your email address, I'll make sure that gets in there, and you'll get some updates from me periodically. And those forms, if you go to crown.org/tools, a lot of those forms, there's calculators. Like if you want to know if I make extra payments on this credit card, how fast, there's debt repayment calculators. They'll tell you how soon you'll be able to pay that off if you keep up with that rate. So there's a lot of useful tools on the website. So I have just a couple more minutes. Are there any questions?
What are your feelings about bankruptcy?
Bankruptcy? Feelings about bankruptcy is we think that there's some reasons why it's okay. If you're getting unduly pressured by your creditors, and it's creating, it's stressful anyway, but if they're creating a whole lot more stress, there's sometimes when it's okay. What we teach in Crown is if you do it, consider still going back and repaying it later. And you have to do that with legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I know that, but there are ways to go back and repay it. But the other part about bankruptcy, if it can be done, is go to your creditor and try to arrange some sort of payment schedule that would keep you from having to, or whoever, declare bankruptcy. So yeah.
How much time would you recommend, or maybe how often would you recommend a person sit down and do their financial planning and spending planning and whatnot?
Yeah, how often should you review your spending plan and that kind of thing? What we would recommend is like maybe once a month you sit down with your wife, or say your wife's doing it. If you're doing it, have her sit down with you so that you both understand what's going on with your finances and talk about them, just so you're in agreement, and then when things come up during the month, if you have to make a decision, you can have it then. Then there's, like financial planning, though, you might do it once a year or something, but the budget, you want to try to stay on top of that.
How much should you be in debt before you even consider bankruptcy?
The question is, how far in debt should you be before you declare bankruptcy? I don't have a guideline for that. I think it's, again, an individual thing and what you might be able to do to avoid it. And it depends on what kind of debt it is, I think, and how that could be handled.
Just add, I want to pay it. I want to finish paying it. But I've just heard of people claiming bankruptcy. Next thing you know, 2 years later, they're buying cars and
Oh,
houses
yeah.
and got good credit.
Yeah.
So, I don't understand how that works.
Well, unfortunately, there are lenders that will do that. After you've declared bankruptcy, because they know you can't declare bankruptcy again, so they'll start making offers to you again. But there'll be higher interest rates, and you're going to pay more for your car insurance. You're going to pay more for renting a home, or even borrowing money to buy a home. You're going to pay for it, even in the future, until your credit score gets back down to something that's acceptable. All right. Well, thank you very much. If you have any other questions, stop by the table. I'm there. We have 2 other volunteers. But thank you for coming, and God bless you guys.
I trust that this message has challenged you and motivated you to take bold steps of faith to advance the kingdom. We are thankful for the help and support we've received on these recordings from Morris Audio Consulting. Visit them on the web at morrisaudioconsulting.com. We also hope you'll take time to learn more about Noble Warriors and the Iron Sharpens Iron Men's Conference Network by visiting noblewarriors.org. God bless you, friend.